Are you thinking about growing your team and you're not sure if you should do that by adding an employee or looking for an independent contractor? Are you unclear about the difference between the two classifications and why that matters to you? If yes, this episode is for you. And if no, this is great information for you to know if you ever are looking to expand your team in the future or you already manage people. I am Melissa Franks, your on-call COO, and after 25 years of working in corporate, I have come here to the Opt-in podcast where I demystify business for you so that you can take that information forward into your role and grow the business that you are with as quickly and successfully as possible. The conversation that we are going to have today is all about who do we choose? An employee? Do we choose a contractor? When's it right? When's it wrong? How does it go? And you can find all sorts of information on the internet. And this episode is really just going to distill down for you the things that you need to consider when you are making the choice. So the good news is if you've listened this far, you know you need somebody. That's fantastic news. And likely you know what role you need. And maybe potentially you even know the person, which again are all fantastic places to be. If you're just considering expanding your team and you're not really sure what direction you want to go and what you need to plan for the future, this is also a really great place to go. I'm going to break it all down as quickly as possible. This one's going to be short and sweet because we're just going to focus specifically on the considerations. You will not get to the end of the podcast and have me tell you definitively this is the direction to go. What you will get is very specific questions to ask yourself, to consider as you are making this decision, and you will have clarity when you go through that process about what steps to take next. So let's jump in and get started. Let's stop wasting time and just get to the meat of it. So really, what is the difference between an employee and an independent contractor? Well, it really comes down to two things: level of autonomy and the benefits that they get with their employment. And I'm using the word employment, not employee, very, very specifically. So when we're looking at do we go employee or do we go contractor, really all of our questions ultimately are going to help us arrive at how much autonomy do we want to allow and what sort of benefits are we willing to offer and afford. Okay, so I am not going to talk about employment law today. I am not a lawyer. And if you have specific questions about the jurisdiction that you are in related to employment law, I strongly encourage you to spend a little bit of money and do a 1-hour consult with an employment lawyer. The reason this is so important is that there is a good amount of states here in the US that really don't do a lot of regulation. And then there are some tricky ones like California, Massachusetts, New York, Minnesota, that have very specific requirements and protections for employees. Why do you need to know this? I'm just going to pause here. You must know the state that you operate in, what your employment laws are. And this spans everything. It's how is an employee classified? Every state and the IRS in the US have tests, so questions that you can answer to determine the classification of a person. That's really great news. It's really vague and unclear. And so that's where the employment law lawyer comes into play. So first, you really need to understand the laws. You need to understand the rules. You need to understand all sorts of things. If you're hiring somebody as an hourly employee, what are the overtime rules? If you have an organization with more than 5 people, what benefits do you need to provide? If you have an organization with more than 10 or 20 or 30, what benefits do you need to be able to provide? You need to understand how independent contractors are classified and the constraints around that from employment law. There's a lot of nuance specific to your location that you must do some diligence and research on. So that's kind of the disclaimer at the top of this. So we're not going to focus on that. What we are going to focus on is how you choose. So the very first thing that I want to start with is money. So the good news is you have already said, I can afford to bring on a team member. And cautionary tale, if you have decided that you can afford to bring on a team member because the last 3 months have been great, I want you to pause this podcast and come back to it after you have done a full year or two of planning. I want you to look at your cash flow and I want you to look at your revenue in the rearview mirror for the last 18 to 24 months. And then I want you to look forward 18 to 24 months and determine, based on your current performance and growth projections, if you can afford this person. So if you have not done that, stop right here. If you have, let's keep going. So you have determined that based on your plans for the future, that and current actual hard facts that you can see in your bank account, in your accounting software, that you can afford to hire somebody, that is fantastic news. The next thing that you must determine is what your budget is. How much can you afford? How much wiggle room in there? And once you know that number, then ask yourself, how much am I willing to pay? Now, you may not know. You may be hiring for a role that you have no experience with. You have maybe a sketch of a job description, or you don't have one at all, but you have a general idea of the responsibilities you want them to have, and you don't know. That is where your friend Google comes in. Google the job. Ask the average salary. Ask the average salary for an employee in your area. Ask the average salary for an employee nationwide. Ask for the average salary of somebody that comes into the office versus for somebody that's virtual. Ask for the average salary of an independent contractor. Ask Google. Ask Google. And you will get a variety of information, and you will need to determine what you want to believe and what you don't. Another really fantastic place to go is to go to LinkedIn and search for the job that you want to hire people for. And most of those roles have a target salary range in them. So you can actually see inside of LinkedIn what the target salary range is. So the first thing that you're going to do is determine your budget. The second you're going to do is determine what pay scale you want to offer, so what you can afford. Okay. And then when you're doing that, what you are going to start to get an indicator of is it more within my budget to have an employee or a contractor? We're going to get back to this because it's a false positive, so you don't want to trust it. But if you are seeing that there's a 20K split between an employee and a contractor, which makes the contractor a little more expensive, and you're like, I think I need to go employee, hold tight, because you might change your mind. Okay? So budget, determine how much you are willing to pay for the role. Those are the first two things that you need to do. Now, what you need to determine is what the nuts and bolts of the role are really going to look like. And this is where the job description comes into play. So whether you are going to hire an employee or an independent contractor, you need to write the dang thing. You can use ChatGPT. You can go to LinkedIn and do a copy and paste of a job description that you really like there. You can phone a friend. You can ask a colleague. You can go to HR if you have HR. There are a variety of ways for you to find job descriptions. My recommendation to you is that you don't just create it from scratch, from your head, unless you have done the job before. The very best thing that you can do is start from somebody else's work. You could absolutely tailor it, and maybe you're making a hybrid role. Maybe it's this and that doesn't really exist in the wild. Totally cool. That's so great. And use the descriptions of the two roles before you start combining. Always start with somebody else's work. And the reason that you do that is because you know that that's been tested in the marketplace. You know that somebody that's been out there searching for a social media manager or a creative director or a marketing manager or a whatever has already done the hard work and rolled up their sleeves and figured out exactly what is required, what responsibilities there are, what qualifications there need to be, because they've got the thing posted and they're getting activity and action on it. And maybe they've even had the person before. So do a little bit of diligence, but start with somebody else's work and then create that job description. You're going to use that job description whether it's a contractor or an employee, but this is where things get really interesting. So the first question that you're going to want to ask yourself is, do I want to direct the work? And if I do, what sort of direction do I want to give? Here are the questions you must ask. Do I want this role to work a standard set of hours, 8 to 5, Monday through Friday? Do I want this role to be available nights and weekends? Do I want this role to physically be in an office location for me, or do I not really care where they work? So start answering those questions. Why does it make that important? Well, because if you want to specify very specific hours of operation for this role, that's going to send you kind of in the employee direction. If you don't care and you just want the results, that means you can get an employee or an independent contractor. Okay, so the first thing is you want to determine exactly how you want to direct the work. And that means, where do you want them to work? When do you want them to work? And then we're going to get to the how in just a second. So if you are very specific about where and when, that is indicating that it's an employee that you're looking for and not an independent contractor. If you don't care, then an independent contractor could be a really viable option for you. Now, the second thing that we're going to look at when we're talking about directing work is how. There is a distinct difference between an employee and a contractor in this scenario. With a contractor, you are only concerned about results. That is it. Results. You do not care, as long as they are compliant with your code of conduct and aligned with your brand values and representing your company as you would expect and acting with integrity and all those things, right? That's a given. You do not care how they get the results, just that they happen, right? With an employee, you care. You want tracking sheets. You want status reports. You want one-on-ones. You want them in team meetings. You want them in Slack channels. You want them checking in and reporting. And you want to be able to know that when they're working and you can kind of keep tabs on them. You care and you require them to do work in a certain way. That is an employee. Now, I get it. This seems really strange. Why would I ever hire an independent contractor if I can't tell them how to do the work? Here's where nuance comes in. With an independent contractor, while the hard and fast rule is that you do not direct when, where, or how they do work, you contract for results and a timeline associated with it. There is nuance, and I'm going to talk to you about that just for a minute so that you can understand and really make the right decision for you. With an independent contractor, the contract governs the relationship. You set up many, many terms and conditions. You set up the compensation structure and the fee structure. Some contracts are project-based, some are time and materials, which means that you're paying by the hour. Some are results specific, like commission. You set up the compensation structure in the contract. In the contract, you can also stipulate the frequency for which you receive status reports. You can't tell them what status report to use. You can say that you need to have a status report weekly. In the contract, you can stipulate that they attend specific company meetings. In the contract, you can stipulate that they use your email system and your Slack channels. The contract is your best friend when you are not hiring an employee and you're hiring a contractor. And the reason for that is because you can use it as a tool, the requirements of delivery of the results. That includes timeline and quality. So what you are also able to do inside of the contract is say how you're going to measure performance. So let's say that you hire a contractor as a social media manager, and one of the results that you must see is that they make 20 posts a week on your social accounts, and that the social accounts that have the stories feature always have content there. And the performance metric is literally, did that happen? Demonstrate for me that it happened. The quality metric that you can add in addition is that it generates growth in your account. It generates enrollment in your offers. It generates new clients. It does leads. It whatever it is that you are looking for. But you see how measuring quality actually is just some additional results. So what you are really talking about is data with a contractor. You absolutely define results. You can associate timelines to those. You can have hard metrics to determine, did they achieve the fixed result and was it done with quality? You can absolutely do that with an independent contractor. With an employee, you can also do those same things. And you get to measure their performance for how they did it, how they're interacting with other team members, how they're communicating to clients. You get to dive deeper with employees on the performance management piece, because while the results absolutely are things that you're going to require from the employee, you get a say in how they deliver them. With a contractor, you don't. So the bright line is really what you're giving feedback on, right? You can give feedback and coaching to the employee. You cannot with the contractor. What you can do is say, this is where you're not meeting our contractual obligations, and I have concerns. And the cool thing is that every contract has a breach section and talks about remedy. So it says, if they're not doing what they're supposed to be doing, then they have X amount of days to fix it. And if they don't fix it with satisfaction, the contract's terminated. Don't need to pay them, whatever your clauses are. You have the ability to put conditions in there to ensure that they deliver results of quality. What you don't have conditions for is that you can coach, mentor, provide feedback, and influence how they are doing the work. So depending on the role that you are looking to fill, independent contractor may not work for you. If you are hiring somebody for customer success and they're interacting with clients all day long, that's probably not a role where you want to limit your ability to direct how they work. Otherwise, you could, but you may churn through a lot of independent contractors before you find the one that just has the thing that is going to work for your business. Okay? So ask yourself the questions. When are they working? Where are they working? And do I care how they're working? You want to know, if you want to dictate when they work, if you want to dictate where they work, and you want to dictate how they work, they are an employee. If you do not care about all of those, or most of those, a contractor is the way to go. Okay? The next thing that you need to ask yourself is this role forever? Is it forever? Because in almost every single case, when you have a contractor for more than a year and you are contracting with a human, like an actual, you contracted with Sally Smith to do a thing, you can do it for a year. In some places, you can do it for 2, and then the IRS and the state employment regulators are going to come in and say, you know what, that person is actually an employee, and you can be penalized for that. So the next thing that you want to ask yourself is duration. Is this a temporary thing? Is this we're going to give it a try for a little while and see if we need it forever? Is this we need it forever, but we're not sure who we need, so we're going to try on a bunch of people first before we then offer the employee? Cool. Independent contractor, off you go. Assuming it's copacetic in your state. If, however, you're like, I'm hiring Sally, I want her to stay with me until I die, doing this job, let's go. Sally is an employee. Do not fool yourself. Don't try to do some shenanigans. Don't try to do some end arounds. Don't try to classify something as one thing and then classify it as another. Sally is an employee, and sooner or later, the IRS, the employment board, or Sally are going to get frustrated with you, and they're going to cause you to take action, which is going to penalize your business and cost you up to tens, if not hundreds of thousands of dollars in arrears, taxes, penalties, settlements in court, etc. So ask yourself, is this role permanent? Is this role temporary? And is the person that I'm placing in this somebody that we need to try on for a year as a contractor to make sure it's a good fit? Or are we just ready and we're going to be married for life? So the duration is really, really important. If you are hiring somebody for project-based work, they're an independent contractor all the way. They are not an employee. If you are hiring somebody as retainer or time and materials or those sorts of things, you really have to consider how long you're going to have them and if it makes sense. And your lawyer has some input as well on whether or not they just become an employee out of the gate. Now, the one caveat to that, and I want to call this out, and again, this is specific to jurisdiction, so you need to do your homework, is that if you are contracting with a company for a service and it's not a specific human, this rule doesn't apply. So for example, if you're contracting with a marketing agency to do your ad campaigns, and while you have Susie assigned to you and she's the one working on it, or Susie's the owner and she's the one you interact with the most, but Susie's contract, because it's with the business, allows Susie to hire somebody later to make them your ads manager, you can work with Susie's business forever and ever and ever and ever. Ever and ever and ever. And even if you hire the business as a service provider and there's just one employee in the business at the time, it doesn't really matter, because your relationship, your contractual relationship is buying a service from a business. You're buying marketing support from a business. You're buying operations support from a business. You're buying communication support from a business. You're buying legal support from a business. You're whatever. Cool. You can do forever. Forever and ever and ever and ever and ever, because those contracts are incredibly different. The nature of that relationship, incredibly different. It's just a whole different ball of wax. If you have questions on this, because it is super complicated, feel free at any time to reach out to me on Instagram. Just DM me, ask the question. I can help you kind of noodle through a little bit of this stuff. So as I said, the next thing that we were talking about was, how long is this rule going to exist? If it's forever, it's employee. If it's temporary, it's a contractor, unless you're trying before you buy on human capital and your state allows you to do it. Now, here is the kicker. This is the piece de resistance. You've gone through all of the questions. You've listened to this podcast a few times. You've stopped and paused me to make sure that you answer the questions. And you're like, I know what I want to do. I got it. I'm going to bring on an employee. It's clear as day. That's what I'm going to do. I'm so excited about it. It's my first employee. It's my fifth employee. I've got a proposal for the owner, for HR. It's like, I know what I'm going to do. It is an employee all the way. Hold up. Just wait a second. Maybe not. Here's why. Employees are expensive. I know. We started the conversation where I said that employees' salary is usually lower than an independent contractor. You want to know why? Because an employee gets a whole bunch of benefits. As soon as you hire an employee, you, the business, have an obligation to pay payroll tax. You have an obligation to pay unemployment. Depending on the size of your business, you have an obligation to provide benefits. Let me say that again. You have to pay payroll tax, unemployment tax, benefits. You got to get workers' compensation insurance. You should have that anyway. There's a whole bunch of additional expenses. You need to provide that employee equipment. You may need to provide that employee a physical location. You need to provide that employee paid days off. I could keep going on. The independent contractor gets none of that. The taxes is the independent contractor's problem. The benefits is the independent contractor's problem. Insurance, independent contractor's problem. If they want to take a day off, they're unpaid. See where I'm going? So before you decide that you're going to hire an employee, you need to do more math. And this is where your accountant comes in. And you need to say, I'm looking to hire an employee. And ideally, you know what state you want to hire them in, because state income tax is different and a business's obligation to pay income tax is different. For example, California has a really high state income tax rate. Florida doesn't have one. So if your business is in Florida and you hire somebody in California, guess what you are doing? You're paying through the nose for income tax. Just going to say, call it a spade a spade. So call your accountant. Say, hey, I want to hire an employee. I want to pay the employee $60K a year. How much more is this going to cost me? So if the employee's salary is $60,000, how much am I going to be paying in unemployment benefits and payroll tax? And then they'll come back to you and they'll say, well, it's $60,000 a year. The additional expense to the business can be $25,000. Okay, so that role is $85K. And then you say, well, what else do I need to do? Oh, I need to get workers' compensation insurance. So you go to your insurance agent and get a quote. That's another $10,000 a year. Okay, so that rolls down $95,000. They're only getting paid before taxes because they have to pay taxes too. So they're only getting paid $60,000 gross, but you, the business, have a burden of $95K. And then you go back to your notes and you're like, the independent contractor is only $75,000. And if you're in a situation where the $95,000 is going to break the proverbial bank and the $75,000 is not, you have your answer. Your business isn't ready for an employee. Even though you want to be able to do all of the things that we talked about, you want to set hours and location and direct how they work. And this role you want to have forever and ever and ever, amen. The burden on the business financially to have an employee is too great. And therefore, if you want the role, the only thing that you can do right now is hire a contractor. And then you got to look at yourself in the mirror. You got to have a real tough conversation right there, right in the mirror and say, am I okay letting go of control? Am I okay with not directing how they work, with not directing when and where? Am I okay with letting go of the reins because I know that the person I hire is going to be an expert because they're a contractor. This is the only thing that they do. And I will build a contract in such a way that I have protections in place for myself. And if you say, yes, I can do it until the business is at a place where I can afford an employee versus a contractor, let's go that route. There's your answer. And if you're looking yourself in the mirror and you're like, I just can't, that independent contractor that shirt does not fit. I can't do it. Then you need to sit down and you need to think. Because you might be in a situation where you can afford the employee, it's just going to hurt a little bit. You might be in a situation where you can come up with other ideas of benefits that are really no cost to you, but would really make somebody's life fantastic. And they might be willing to take a lower salary so that you can get it in budget. Or the reality is that you may just need to keep doing it without that role until you get the business to a place where you can afford it. This is the most difficult part of growing a team because it is all exciting when you see the revenue come in, when you see profit at the gross margin perspective. It's so exciting to see when you have cash in the bank and things are looking really, really good and that you've finally said, I need help and I'm ready for it. It is so exciting. It's so exciting to have so much work that you need somebody else. And the harsh reality of business is that it all comes down to the numbers because your goal ultimately is to continue to grow your business, your department, your division, your whatever so successfully that you continue to grow with it, you continue to profit from it, and that this isn't just the first or the next. You see so many more additions to the team as you go because you're going to need it because there's going to be so much work. More work, more money, more work, more money, more people. That equation goes hand in hand. And the reality is that it's expensive. And that in order to ensure long-term viability, you really have to sit down and do the math. You need to look at the harsh reality of what it looks like when you bring on an employee. And in many cases, it's just too great a leap for where you are right now. Now, if you're flush on cash and you've been doing stuff by yourself and you're like, smooth sailing, $95K, not a big deal, I can totally pay that much money for it. Green light. Because what I will tell you is that the least risky thing to do in business is to hire an employee instead of an independent contractor. When you hire an employee, as long as you're following your employment laws and doing performance management and, if you ever have to terminate somebody, you follow all of the rules for it to do that, that protects your business the best. I will always recommend that the safest route is to hire employees versus contractors. Always, always, always. And then in the exact same breath, I will say, and oh, by the way, you can get sued no matter what. You can. Employees, if they're terminated, they're unhappy, they're going to sue you. It just is true. This is the state of the union here in the United States of America. And contractors, generally speaking, if their contract is terminated and it's a massive ding to their livelihood or they're really incensed about it, they can get litigious too. But from a 90% of the time perspective in business, an employee is a safer route. It just is. So if you can afford to hire an employee, you know the role is going to last forever, and you really want this person to be a member of your team, adopt the culture, be with you long term, you hire an employee. The independent contractor is a great way to build a bridge until you can afford the employee. An independent contractor is a great way to test if you need a role, or what skills you need for the role, or how much time you need. It could be that you think you need a full-time employee, but what you actually realize is you just need a part-time person. The independent contractor is a really great way to test until you know what you need to do and what you can afford, and then you hire an employee. So like I said, we're going to get to the end of this podcast, and you're going to have a lot of questions to answer and a lot of considerations to make, but ultimately this decision is up to you. How much risk do you want to accept? How much work do you want to direct? And what can you afford? The decision between employee or independent contractor really comes down to those three things. I wish you all of the luck in the world, and in the show notes is a lead magnet of a checklist of these questions. And what that's going to do is it's going to help you determine what you need to do. So all you have to do is click the link, give me your email, because I want to be friends with you. Can we be friends? I don't know who y'all are. You know who I am. So click the link, get the download, re-listen to the podcast, answer the questions while you're doing the thing, and get started on hiring the right role in the right way for you. I hope that this was helpful. If you know anybody else that is hiring and they're struggling with this decision, please share the episode with them. And until we talk again, please know you are wise, you are strong, you are capable, and I believe in you.